My guest this week is Pauline Cox, a functional nutritionist in Bristol, England, and we talk about all of my favorite subjects, from intermittent fasting to metabolic hormones, improving liver function, the nutrient density of animal foods, and even the benefits of cold water exposure on this week's episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. Let's get to it. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. With me is Pauline Cox. Pauline, welcome.
Hi, Zane. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. Pauline is a functional nutritionist in the UK and founder of Sow and Arrow, which is a online, actually, and you have a store, you have a standing store, but a keto and low carb food retailer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. This is, we just connected on Instagram and we seem to be very parallel in all of our values. And I wanted to have you on and have a conversation because you were sharing great stuff and you were living it. I saw you, so you're living it out. So that's so good to see. And we'll get into that, what I saw, but as a functional nutritionist, so you're working with people. Do you work with a functional other medical practitioners as well? Are you pretty much solo on that?
I work with mainly groups, actually. I have a health membership that I teach and do regular lives with. I'm actually currently studying for a master's level in integrative medicine also. So
Oh, wow.
I'm constantly adding to my learning and understanding. And I feel that it's a lifelong journey, Zane. I'm sure you feel the same. There's always... Yes. Once you sort of step down one pathway, there's a whole area of information that becomes so intriguing. So it's a constant journey. And I love taking those science-based concepts and translating them into easy to use protocols and ways that people can understand that information and really empower them with knowledge to help them start to change their life and step by step improve their health.
I see. Awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot needs to be shared and retaught, I think, relearned. I think there's yes. So much supposedly known that it's just so false, so off base. So you work with group, then a lot of groups then on Facebook and so
I
forth.
do, yes. I mean, I do some individualized work, but time has become more difficult recently. I'm writing my second book at the moment, which is due for release in 2023. So awesome. There's a lot happening. So I found that working with groups of individuals was a great way of helping more people get access to information and create a community as well. So I run my private health membership, but then free groups within Instagram and Facebook, and then there's the store as well. So there's always a lot of juggling, but really it's all about sharing information and helping people access those key nuggets of information that are going to help them on their journey.
Absolutely. So what is your kind of your basis, if you could explain like how you approach nutrition and diet, whether it's weight loss, what you're focusing on, or just general healthy lifestyle? What is your thesis on that?
Well, my real focus is on metabolic health. So it's about helping people to understand that when our metabolic hormones become out of whack, it can play havoc with our inflammatory levels, our weight gain, our mental health, our thyroid function. I mean, everything. Fertility, female hormones particularly. I'm a huge fan of helping women to start to understand how their female sex hormones can just become so out of balance when insulin resistance starts to kick in and inflammatory levels go up. So for me, when we start to look at metabolic health and start to understand how the foods we eat and when we eat has such a big impact on our metabolic hormones, and then from there, all of these other areas of our health can either suffer or benefit.
I see. Okay. So from a nutrition standpoint, how do you approach that as far as what they actually eat and how you...
Yes. Well, for me, it all starts with the gut. It's really about removing inflammatory foods and adding in really healthful foods, because so much of, as Hippocrates says, disease starts in the gut. So when we start to heal the gut and remove things that are damaging the gut, that's really the first port of call in my mind. And the things that damage the gut, ironically, are products and food items that can have negative impacts on our blood sugars and mental well-being and all other areas of health as well. So I often encourage people to remove wheat and gluten out of their diet. Then grains, if they're happy to start looking at reducing the grains and the impact of grains on their gut and their blood sugars. So it's really about looking at the key sort of areas of their health, making sure they're getting adequate quality protein, plenty of healthy fats. And then I'm a big fan of fermented vegetables and starchy vegetables to feed the gut, particularly fermented though. I'm a big fan. Every day the fermented foods come into my diet.
I agree. That's the best way for me to ingest vegetables. I feel like I digest them the best when they've been fermented. And the tolerance for that, for like, for instance, raw vegetables, for me, decreased as I got older. I just became less and less tolerant, and noticed that I had less comfort trying to digest raw vegetables. But fermented it seems to be excellent. I mean, I don't even notice any difficulty digesting them. I don't notice any bloating. It just really feels good, and I do feel like it obviously, as you mentioned, it heals or feeds the gut bacteria, the biome that we need so much.
I mean, as we age, our stomach acidity generally becomes less acidic. So whereas an optimal gut acidity would be sort of pH 1 to 3, which if you cast your mind back to school biology class, it's a really acidic environment. It's almost acidic enough to just dissolve a razor blade. And as we age, that acidity becomes less acidic. So we start creeping up to pH 4, pH 5. And that means some of these foods, particularly the fibrous vegetables, they have the cellulose cell wall that the gut needs to break down to access, the iron, for example, or the other nutrients within these plant-based foods. So we need a really acidic environment for that to happen. And when you have something like a fermented cabbage, then it's swimming in lactic acid. So firstly, you're helping to reacidify your gut. And secondly, it's almost pre-digested where it's been broken down already by this acid environment. So it's a real win-win for us as humans, and particularly as we're kind of getting, over the age of 30, 35, our stomach acidity can start to change. But actually, Zane, with modern diets and all the stress that people are under, our stomach acidity can change at a much younger age. So younger individuals are getting those issues with digesting fibers and plant-based foods and vegetables that they wouldn't have necessarily, 10, 20 years ago when our food environment looked completely different.
I see. So is there a way to naturally increase, even though we're aging, to increase our acidity? Is it primarily through the fermented food, or is there other? There's
a few ways, actually. Zinc is really important for stomach acidity. Okay. And, we tend to get really low in zinc. Sugar lowers zinc. Ironically, you need a good acidic environment within your gut to absorb zinc so that you have access to zinc. So it's kind of a catch-22. As you absorb less zinc, you make less stomach acidity. So zinc-rich foods, zinc supplements. I personally supplement zinc every day to really help with my immune function, but also my stomach acidity. And also the other thing is looking out for things that deplete zinc, and the contraceptive pill depletes zinc. So it's having an awareness of where your zinc might be becoming low and how to try and mitigate against that.
I see.
So zinc will help to increase your stomach acidity. Things like apple cider vinegar. I mean, I'm a huge fan of just a shot of ACV or having it in a tonic, which will again just help to establish the acidity in the gut. Fermented foods are again a nice rich source of acidity. And then having things like betaine HCl, which is a natural supplement that can help to reacidify the gut and just help to begin that process of reabsorbing the nutrients, zinc and magnesium and iron, and then help the body to stay on top of producing acid. And actually, another thing is minimizing stress, because stress really has an impact on our gut acidity. So if we can keep our emotional stress low, then that helps with our stomach acidity also.
Well, that's a big call these days, isn't it? Keeping our stress low.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And people wonder why their food habits go out the window when there's this stressful environment, and we all start getting bloated, and we're getting changes in our digestive health. And actually, if we just start with taking it back to the basics, right? I'm really stressed at the moment. What do I need to do to support my gut health? Chew slowly, be mindful when you're eating, get some acidic foods in there like the kimchi, the sauerkraut. Don't drink big glasses of water when you're eating. Keep your water 45 minutes before or after, so you're not diluting all the gastric juices. And, having foods on your plate that aren't going to disrupt your gut health, the processed foods and the foods that might not necessarily be supporting your gut health.
Like you mentioned, the grains, the gluten. How about seed oils? I mean, there's a lot of.
Yeah. Again, this is why I think it's really important that people don't see something like keto as a blanket term for healthy, because there are a lot of individuals, especially this time of year, who are trying out new ways of eating, and keto being one of the very popular ones here in the UK, and I'm sure over in America too. But it's really important, and I really stress this to anyone who I'm talking to or presenting to, that we want to ensure those fats are healthy, but they're not inflammatory fats, they're not rancid, they're not oxidized. And because if we're consuming these rancid and high levels of omega-6 oils, it's going to create inflammation in the body. And look, yes, you might lose weight. And if your ultimate goal is just to lose weight, then there are many ways of achieving that. But if you want to really optimize your health and improve your energy, your sleep, your metabolic health, your insulin sensitivity, your recall, your memory, your focus, all of these wonderful things that happen when we really look at health from a system perspective and not just a weight loss area, then they happen, and weight loss happens as a byproduct. It's not such a great goal to focus on. It's good to monitor as a sort of a byproduct of good health.
I agree completely. I understand a lot of people, they focus on it, especially if they're overweight, but they think that's when we get caught up in the whole calories in, calories out. We start looking at, or even like you just said, strictly macros without keto from a macro standpoint, but not looking at the quality of the foods that we're eating. We get this, what we call dirty keto, where it's just because it's low carb and higher fat, that makes it ideal. That's what we're targeted on, rather than looking at whole food, fermented food, non-inflammatory fats making up the food, not processed keto. So it sounds like you even focus on with you mentioned starches, but whole food starches like a potato or sweet potato or some sort of
carrots, sweet potato, fruit, squash. Squash. And I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, that using those tools that we have to really help our body to ramp up our metabolic rate and lower our insulin levels. Insulin is such a huge problem to so many people. And I know we kind of have this obsession with blood sugars, but actually hyperinsulinemia is a major problem for so many people. And it's not something that's as easily picked up on as high blood sugars. So improving insulin sensitivity is absolutely key to improving our brain function and our female hormones, male hormones, our fertility, our weight loss or fat burning. And as we really embark on time restricted eating and fasting, it can hugely impact our insulin sensitivity and lower those insulin levels, so that we can start to use this fat burning machinery that we have and utilize the ketones that are so beneficial to our health.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of fear around intermittent fasting or time restricted eating and lowering metabolism. That's such a misunderstood. And if you could maybe open that up for us, I'd love to hear how you explain that to people.
Well, there is this myth that needs busting, and that is we need to eat small amounts regular and often, and that's the best way to keep our metabolic rate up. And actually, the opposite is true. And we know this from human studies, but also mice studies. And when we give our bodies a sort of a window of eating, this is when our body utilizes that fuel. But then when we have, let's say we eat within a window of 8 hours every day, and then we have this period when we're not eating. So whenever we're not eating, our blood sugars can lower, not dangerously low, but they kind of stay pretty consistent, about a teaspoon of circulating blood sugar, and our insulin levels lower. Now, at that point, the body says, okay, I need some fuel. We're dual fuel burners. We have the ability to burn glucose for fuel or to use ketones for fuel. So our body at that point says, right, I need to keep my energy levels consistent. So glucagon, a hormone to help with lipolysis, fat burning, is released and increases. And that allows us to access the stored fuel we have on our body by way of body fat. And this is where the magic happens. So we get the body fat's broken down into triglycerides, which is converted into ketones. And then we have our ketone levels increase. Ketones are very good for our brain function. They are very easily passed over into the neurons. Unlike glucose, which we can get this insulin resistant state in the brain, ketones are great for increasing our metabolic rate, particularly in brown fat. So insulin suppresses the metabolic rate, and the thermogenic impact of brown fat is suppressed by insulin, whereas ketones increase it. So it has this really beneficial impact on our overall calorie burning. And ketones are also very anti-inflammatory. They're great for conditions of inflammation, and they're great for conditions of insulin resistance. So as we're having these periods when we're not eating, all of this is going on in the body. We switch. We have this metabolic flexibility where we can switch to fat burning and get all of the benefits. This state when our bodies are very, very well tuned to periods of scarcity. Now, it's not a very long time to go without eating if we're having this 8-window gap, but we have all of these genes that are switched on. The gene expression for when we're not eating is incredible. We have this state called autophagy that kicks in. It's very beneficial to our immune function. It helps us to create almost this anti-aging impact on the body. So we're not designed to be eating continuously. We're creatures of scarcity, but we're living in an environment of abundance. And we never really get to access that magic that happens when we have these periods when we're not eating.
Exactly. And such a, like you said, so beneficial. Disease resistance, anti-aging, brain function, all those benefits that come alive because we need a time to break down. We can't always be building. We have to have a time to turn over, right? Those damaged cells, that's damaged tissue.
Absolutely.
But as you said with insulin, and that's a big focal point of mine as well. It's looking at fasting insulin levels, in blood work, which a lot of doctors don't even test for. They're just looking, your blood sugar looks fine. Meanwhile, their fasting insulin could be rising for 5 or 10 years, long before their blood sugar starts to show itself. And so that's nothing better than fasting to reduce fasting insulin levels. And most people probably aren't aware of that because their doctor hasn't mentioned it. But as a functional nutritionist, I'm guessing that's one of the tests you look for. Do you look at that fasting insulin?
I think it's getting that awareness as well, that people they don't see insulin as the bad guy, but actually, insulin is incredibly aging. Insulin is high levels of chronically high levels of insulin is very damaging to the body. It's very aging and it drives chronic illness. So, we really must start focusing on what's driving our insulin, because, we have stress that drives our insulin levels up as well as inflammation. So how can we mitigate against the chronic stress we're under, the constant inflammation from the seed oils, from our nutritional choices, from poor gut health, from our dietary choices? And when people start to understand that once we eat, our blood sugars go up, how much they go up depends on what you're eating, when you're eating, your insulin, your glucose sensitivity, how much muscle mass you have, how active you are in the day. And if people really get the concept that as blood sugars go up and insulin levels go up, they don't immediately come down again. It can take some time for those to start to lower, but at that point, we're already looking for the next snack or the next food substance to be eating. So we need to allow those blood sugars to go up, the insulin to go up, and then come down again in order for it to really drop. And that's when insulin is low and suppressed, that's when we access this whole world of fat burning and this world of ketone availability, which I'm a huge fan of ketones. I just think if we really focused on becoming these metabolically flexible individuals and took the benefits from ketones, we'd all have that better mental clarity, that ability to become more resilient in times of stress, and it would benefit everyone for their mental function, mental well-being, as well as the physical benefits that you get from ketones.
Absolutely. I actually love exercising in a fasted state. I'll fast all night and then work out sometime before I start my first meal, and challenge those ketone production, but just my body's ability to create energy in a deprived or fasted state is challenging that metabolism even more. So it's training that to be more efficient. And so, yes, can I work out for 2 hours like the guy in the gym who's been downing pre-workout drinks and sugar? And like, probably not, but I really want to. It's not about can I work off what I just ate. It's like, what kind of energy can I create?
Yes.
In that fasted state, how do I challenge my metabolic rate or my metabolic system to, like the glucagon, to release stored fuel and use it more efficiently? And I think it should be a different paradigm of how to think about eating and exercise and movement for health. How about in terms of longevity rather than performance in the workout? If we're thinking about how to live longer, healthier, we need to be looking at hormones rather than the weight on the bar or the calories we're taking in. It really starts with the hormones, as you've mentioned. And you've said so much here. I'm like thinking of so many nuggets. I just want to out with the brown fat, which we're going to get to. But what is let's just say your lunch when you do start to eat? What does that look like? What does your plate look like? What's on your plate?
I eat the majority of my food at lunchtime. I'll quite often do a 1 meal a day. I like to eat that way. I like to really fill up on lunch. And I'm going to reference some studies here because it's quite interesting when we look at the amount of food we eat over the whole day, or really condense that food into a time restricted type of pattern. And there's 12-month studies, so quite a good amount of time, that have studied the impact of eating your food over the course of the day versus within a specific time window of 8 hours. And those individuals who were in the restricted eating, the sort of 8-hour eating window, had a much better body composition and improved weight loss than those who actually gained weight eating the exact same food over the course of the day.
Wow.
So again, that comes down to this ability of the body to stabilize blood sugars, lower insulin, and increase fat burning. So I like to eat plentiful. I enjoy food very much, but I would eat, a typical plate for me would look something like half of the plate would be full of fermented cabbage, fermented beetroot, some sort of plant-based, low carb, plant-based, but colorful food. Then I would have a quarter of my plate with protein, quality protein. Today I had salmon, wild salmon. I had mushrooms, peppers, fried in butter. I added the salmon. Then I had a boiled egg with that, sliced, put on top with some Roquefort, which is a raw French sheep's cheese. And I had fermented beetroot with it and some sauerkraut. So I always have plenty of delicious, healthy fats by way of raw cheese, avocado mayonnaise, eggs. I'm a huge fan of eggs, boiled eggs, to protect the precious fats in the center.
Gotcha.
And then some vegetables like mushrooms or cabbage, sauerkraut, some peppers, some really delicious, colorful vegetables to bring the plate alive.
Awesome. So you get there's a lot of nutrients in not only the fermented veggies, but it's also in the cheese, the fat, the animal-based fats, the animal-based. I know you eat meat as well, quite a bit.
Yes,
frequently.
Red meat. I love red meat.
Red meat. So, and which has taken such a beating over the last, I don't know, all of my life. So 40 plus years, almost 50 years now, we've been telling people to stop eating red meat. Yeah. People don't realize the nutrient density of red meat.
It's incredible.
It is incredible. It really is one of the most nutritious things on your plate. And I generally cover half my plate with meat of some kind, and usually it's red meat or eggs, 4 eggs, and so help people understand, because they've heard me talk about it enough. But I want to hear from you. Other side of the pond, let's uh, let's talk about the benefits of red meat, which has been so
Yes.
vilified over the last 4 decades.
Well, firstly, it's an incredible source of protein, and
Mm,
we don't necessarily get enough protein. One of the reasons we don't get enough amino acids is because our stomach acidity isn't able to break down the protein
yes.
into its constituent amino acids. So we do have to make sure we have good stomach acidity. But the benefits of a beautiful, juicy red steak with all of the fat marbled through it is you're
Mm,
getting these wonderful benefits of the meat, but you're also getting in there the omega-3s. If it's grass-fed, pasture-raised, you're getting these amazing omega-3 fatty acids that are in a package that's protecting them.
mm,
So omega-3 fatty acids are quite prone to oxidation. They are double bond fats, so they can be easily oxidized or peroxidized within the body.
mhm.
So having it in nature's package where you have these antioxidants to protect those omega-3 fatty acids is just the perfect package for eating your meats with the protein, with the iron, and your omega-3s in there. So you're getting so much from that meat. For example, iron, a lot of women particularly are often low in iron,
Right.
mainly because they tend to have hormonal disruption. So they might get very heavy periods. So they lose a lot of blood and a lot of iron, and then they become very anemic. They might be on the contraceptive pill to try and help regulate that heavy menstrual cycle, which then means they're absorbing less iron, absorbing less zinc. Then they become even further anemic, and their stomach acidity starts to struggle even more. So they access less iron even further. So it becomes this downward spiral. So red meat is a very bioavailable source of iron compared to something like spinach or kale, which,
Right.
when you look at the two next to each other, you might think, well, actually their iron levels are comparable, but it's the bioavailability that we must look at when it
Mm,
comes to these food sources. And the iron, the heme iron in a steak is really accessible if we have good stomach acidity.
mm.
So there are multiple benefits. And the other thing that I think gets a bit of a bad rap is liver. And liver is extremely nutritious. It's like Mother Nature's multivitamin. It is packed with vitamin A and B12 and copper and zinc and selenium. It is just a powerhouse of nutrients. And, having a portion of liver just once a week or a couple of times a month
Yeah.
is really a great way of massively optimizing your nutrient density, particularly vitamin A, which a lot of people are low in vitamin A,
Right. I eat a
mainly
little
because
bit
they're seed
almost
oils.
every day, actually, almost
Yeah.
every day, I eat a little bit of liver. And people don't realize, I mentioned bioavailability. I mean, compared to, I've seen your post mention this, the retinol that's in an
Yes.
animal-based source vitamin A versus beta carotene in a
Yeah.
plant-based, we don't convert that too well, do we?
No. Very low, actually. I mean, in some people, it's as low as 10%. So,
Mm,
you have these colorful vegetables that often people, you'll see nutritionists talking about the high levels of vitamin A, and you're like,
right.
that's not vitamin A, that's beta carotenes or carotenes. And in order to convert carotenes into retinol, we need bile acid. We need really good gut health, and we
Yeah,
need
yeah.
really great liver function. And that's not the case with a lot of people. And actually, young children have very, very little conversion of carotenes into retinol. So it is incredibly important that kids get their vitamin A through eggs or salmon or liver,
Mhm.
fatty fish. When we see children on a vegan diet or even a vegetarian
Mm.
diet, it's really important that they supplement these nutrients, because otherwise they're not
Yeah.
getting those nutrients. They're not getting sufficient nutrients from a vegan diet. And
Oh, no.
that research has been shown to absolutely be the case. Children on a vegan diet will really, unless you're supplementing, they will be malnourished.
Absolutely. Though the B vitamins, B12 specifically is animal-based, A, D,
Yes.
E, and in the fats,
K2.
K2, and especially in livers, right? And certain cheeses.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. This is why I love the raw cheeses so much, Zane, is because you get, if you're having a lovely raw blue sheep's cheese or a nice raw goat's cheese is very high in medium chain triglycerides. You're getting all
mm,
the bacteria in there as well. So it's a nice form of fat that's not, it's not so scary when people are really worried about saturated fats. Goat's cheese is a really it's quite easy to digest, particularly if it's raw, and it has those higher levels of MCT, so less likely to be stored as fat and much more likely to be used for ketones by the body.
Right. The saturated fat, just for clarity, you and I know this from, it's not even a question anymore, but saturated fats being the healthy fats that you're talking about because they are so resistant to oxidation and peroxidation in our bodies, resistant to inflammation. It's the polyunsaturated fats that are so easily oxidized and create the inflammation in our bodies, that especially the man-made ones, not so much that reside maybe in a food, in our whole food package, but the ones that have been extracted from like the soy, the safflower and all that, and then put into our processed foods, and they're just oxidizing from day one, are they not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So and I'm a huge fan of ghee and grass-fed butter. People still have this misconception that a fat in your diet will cause cholesterol and issues with cholesterol.
Right.
And, time and time again, the research is showing us that it's not the fat causing the high levels of triglycerides and the oxidized LDL. It's actually the way we're eating when we combine our burgers, which have the high fat and the high carbs and the processed nature. That's a surefire way to increase obesity, increase triglycerides, and really increase your levels of oxidized LDL.
Yeah, oxidized being coming from those polyunsaturated fats, right? Because they're oxidized. So you get the fats and the triglyceride that it's going to be oxidized. And then again, you had high fat, high carb. Well, then you have a real insulin. That's processed food, right? That's donut.
Absolutely.
Basically, it's a donut. So and that's most of our processed foods where they have a happy, sunshiny face on them, sold as healthy. That's what's really creating disease in our bodies, is it not?
It really is. And sadly, food scientists have nailed the addictive kind of perfect formula, where their addictive formula is based on the perfect amount of salt, sugar, and fat. So you have this very addictive food, and then there's the 5 A's of food addiction. So you have the perfect kind of formula for food addiction, which is the thing that just stimulates your dopamine system. It lights your brain up, and you're like, wow, our caveman genes, our brain that's constantly looking for food in a scarcity environment is lit up by these dopamine stimulating foods. So we have these scientists working on this to create the really highly addictive foods. Then you have this constant advertising. So whenever we see this food, it's triggering those neuroassociations. So we're producing dopamine before we're even retasting that food. So we get this dopamine, which is a very strong, powerful, motivating neurotransmitter. So it's making us take action to go and buy this food because we're seeing it everywhere around us. And then we have the availability. And availability is really important for a food addiction. And, these foods are available everywhere. Corner shops and vending machines and train stations. And, you can't go anywhere without smelling food and seeing food all around you. And then it's the affordability. So, these foods are cheap, very often highly affordable and cheap, so that they're just mass produced and they're everywhere. And you can buy lots of them for very little money. And then it's age of onset. So the younger you are when you start these addictive foods, the more addicted you become, and the harder the addiction is to break. So this model, this addiction of kind of business model, was first used by the tobacco industry, but it's been adopted by the processed food and sugar industry. And it works a treat, as we can see, because food related illness is now the leading cause of death globally. So it's kind of tragic, isn't it?
Lifestyle disease, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, the big ones. And they drove. And let's face it. Let's be honest. It drove. If we look at the stats have just even come out recently, even from the CDC, the comorbidities drove death from COVID. They drove it 100%. Yeah. 94% of them had 2 or 3 comorbidities that died. And so many of those comorbidities were avoidable through lifestyle. And yet
100%.
We try to tell people this 2 years ago, and nobody listened. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory that exercise and improving your diet would improve your resistance to disease, of any disease. Yeah. But no, Uber Eats and Netflix became the thing to do. because there's nothing to do but hide in your
And get your
house.
Krispy Kreme when you get your vaccination.
I mean, yeah. And have the food delivered to your house because you don't want to go outside and get fresh air, sunshine, and movement. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have created a more detrimental environment for health. And
I agree.
mean, it was government stamped approval, mandated even. And it's sad, yet, but people often just don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear, it's because it does take some effort. It takes some will to change that. And I understand food addictions you're dealing with. I mean, there could be emotional trauma being medicated there and so forth. But you're right. There's an environment of food addiction that has been created by research and food scientists and a lot of money.
A lot of money.
In our country, I don't know how it is with your country, but in our country, our nutrition experts, really the registered dietitians, their oversight committee or oversight foundation that creates their education is funded primarily by the largest processed food companies in the world, like General Mills, Pepsi, Coke. They're making the grains, they're making the sodas, the sugar foods, all the processed foods. They're the ones sponsoring our nutrition council, and it's called the Nutrition Academy, and they create our education for registered. So it's really, it's a backdoor. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
It is a recipe for disaster.
We're at a peak of poor health, and there's no secret to you and I, but yet, people think it's become normalized, that obesity has become normalized and even embraced, and it's normal to be on these medications to manage our blood sugar and blood pressure much earlier than it was even 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's incredible. It's incredible. And so I'm sure you have a lot of people who you work with that they may have the desire to come off their medications, to reverse diabetes, to reverse and improve their hormone levels.
And improve their blood sugars, particularly. And that's one thing we know is as we aging is correlated with higher blood sugars.
Yes.
The two do go hand in hand. And so if you're not doing something to mitigate that increase in blood sugar, i.e. weight training or helping to retain your lean muscle mass or increase your lean muscle mass even, because muscle mass is one of the most effective ways of helping to keep our blood sugars under control. It is super effective. And we just start to lose lean muscle mass as we age, not because we have to, but because we're sugar burners and we don't exercise enough, we don't challenge our muscles enough. So by improving our sleep and our growth hormone and maintaining growth hormone, and by time restricted eating and understanding that the muscles are going to really help to keep your blood sugars down, it can really slow the aging process and the conditions associated with high blood sugars as we age. So, I mean, there's a lot we can do to really help slow and prevent that. That sort of pathway that people just think of as being inevitable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it has to be, you said it has to be a conscious effort. You cannot think if I avoid this, I'll be all right. No, it has to be a conscious effort. Daily, really, to control that. And I know a big point for you is optimizing liver function. That plays such a huge role in stabilizing blood sugar, in the whole role of creating ketones with intermittent fasting. So if you could unpack how you address liver function and what you recommend to improve that.
I think liver function is massively underrated. I think because it's sort of the silent soccer mamas. I heard Ben Adazi saying the other day, or Azidi, sorry. It's the kind of workhorse of the body, and it does so much. It has over 500 functions. And if it starts to struggle, we don't always know about it. Certain things, if you whack your knee, it hurts. It'll tell you straight away, you've hurt me. The liver's not like that. The liver won't tell you, I'm struggling, I'm really suffering here. It will just keep going, and it tries to adapt to the different circumstances. The high levels of sugars or high levels of alcohol or medication or stress that the body's under. So the liver's constantly trying to adapt to its environment. And then eventually, when it becomes very dysfunctional, very fatty, inflamed, that's when you might start to get some symptoms. The fatigue might have been there for a while, the tiredness might have been there for a while, but this is when, your bile production may start to lower, and then your fat-soluble nutrients like your vitamin A and D and E, you just can't absorb those nutrients so well anymore. So you might start to notice, you might be getting dry skin, or you might be getting night blindness or skin issues because your vitamin A levels are becoming lower. So you start to get these secondary symptoms, particularly for women. The liver is incredibly important for buffering estrogen and cortisol, but estrogen is one that many women will suffer with these high levels of high levels of estrogen, so estrogen dominance, and just put it down to normalized life. I have PMS, it's just, I've always had it, or I have really heavy periods, it just happens. But as we start to improve liver function and allow the liver to do its job, which is to buffer these circulating hormones, particularly estrogen, then the estrogen actually gets shunted out with the bile, excreted through the bowels. And this is where bile plays its very important role, in that the liver produces the bile accesses the fat-soluble nutrients, but it also plays a very important role in excreting toxins. So it allows for great passage of bowel movements. And if we don't have adequate bile, then estrogen gets reabsorbed and toxins get reabsorbed into the body. So bile plays an important role in a number of things, but particularly for accessing our fat-soluble nutrients and for eliminating toxins and eliminating toxic levels of estrogen, or the kind of estrogen that we want to be getting out of the body. So there are so many symptoms that we accept of liver dysfunction that can be hugely improved as we start to improve our liver function.
Right. So, and I think that's a similar mechanism you mentioned with getting rid of estrogen that we use for getting rid of excess cholesterol when we need to. Our liver will get rid of excess cholesterol when it needs to filter out. If for some reason we have too much or something doesn't want in there, it can take it all through bile salts. Blood sugar. A lot of insulin resistance begins at the level of the liver. Fatty liver disease, being such an unknown. And if you go to a doctor, they don't have medication for it. So they'll tell you there's no cure. The best thing you do is, as we've talked about, fasting. I mean, how much better can you get for fatty liver?
Absolutely.
It has many roles.
Brilliant for fatty liver.
And when I've heard fitness professionals tell people, like as we mentioned before, eat to maintain blood sugar. Eat often to maintain your blood sugar. And I was like, what do you think the liver's for? The primary role of the liver is to maintain stable blood sugar.
And we are creatures of this amazing adaptation. We adapt to the environments that we live in. So if we had to eat every 2 hours, we'd never have survived.
Oh my gosh,
we wouldn't have survived to this point. We have this ability to, use glucose for fuel, but equally use this amazing refrigerator of food that we carry around with us for days and days on end, if need be. And then lo and behold, there's a bushel of berries. Let's chow down on that. We have that ability, but so many of us have lost that ability because insulin is blocking it.
Correct.
So, as you pointed out, fasting is incredible for the liver, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease didn't even exist 20, 30 years ago. Now it's everywhere.
It's like 25% of the population, I think, something like that.
It's incredible. And, we need to address and heal the liver, the inflammation around the liver. As you pointed out, it's such an important organ for LDL cholesterol. And this is one of the reasons that atherosclerosis is a major problem for people, because these LDL particles are supposed to come to the liver where they get recycled. And the receptors within the liver aren't recognizing the glycated and oxidized LDL. And so they're just recirculating. So LDL levels increase oxidized LDL levels increase. And then because of the systemic inflammation, you get these changes in the endothelial lining of the cardiovascular system. And then the sort of increased arterial rigidity causes the blood pressure to increase, which drives these oxidized LDL particles into the endothelial lining. Then the macrophages come along and try to gobble them up, doing a good job. The immune system's trying its best. Then they become foam cells. And then from there, the atherosclerotic plaque begins to form. And again, it's just this perfect storm of high blood sugars and low levels of omega-3 and high levels of omega-6, poor liver function, increased blood pressure. And when you get this perfect storm, that's when you start to get bit by bit these changes in so many of the systems, and atherosclerosis in the case where the LDL is building up.
Absolutely. Excellent description of heart disease. And none of it had to do with eating eggs or steak.
Absolutely not. You will never be able to make as much cholesterol through eating as your body can make.
You can't absorb it. We don't absorb it.
The body makes a lot more cholesterol than we can eat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 90% of it's created in our liver. So is our liver trying to kill us? I'm sorry. And we make estrogens, testosterone, cortisol from cholesterol. And has so many other functions as well. I mean, so the functions of cholesterol, is the beneficial. I mean, antimicrobial. I mean, it's huge, and yet we vilify something, and you can't help but wonder if it was not just to sell medications and processed food.
Yeah.
Like, here's a non-fat food packaged up, a little sunshine on it. Oh, it's fat-free. Here, eat this for you. And by the way, your cholesterol is starting to climb because your triglycerides are going through the roof. I wonder how that happened. Here's a statin. And so, when you could just eliminate the processed food and go back to a whole food source of a balanced plate. And even a balanced plate doesn't have to be extreme, doesn't have to be, balanced plate of whole food, and you could correct the whole problem.
Yeah.
It's really, we've been sold the problem and then sold the solution. And it's that vicious cycle again, where one creates the other. Truly angering.
It's frustrating because there's a narrative coming from individuals like yourself and myself where we're trying to help people see these quite simple truths, and then there's this very loud narrative coming from very powerful organizations that it's very difficult to sort of overcome the noise.
Yeah,
exactly. And this is where people really need to start to empower themselves with knowledge and information and go, hold on, that actually makes a lot of sense. I've been on statins and now my cholesterol's low and now my testosterone is getting low and I feel really demotivated and I feel, my sex drive is gone and my desire to do anything is gone and I have erectile dysfunction and I'm just feeling and now I'm aching because my coenzyme Q10 levels have gone down and I just need even more medication to make me feel better. And it's this real downward spiral. And I think the penny starts to drop with some people and they're like, hold on, that does make sense. And when they take control of that, that's just such a joyous moment because, 2-3 months down the line, they're like, wow, I feel so different. It's like, boom, the lights have come on and life's great again. So
Right. But it is hard to get past that when you have someone who's come from their doctor and their doctor's worried that their cholesterol level went up when they changed their diet a little bit, their total cholesterol, which is almost meaningless. I mean, the total LDL, their C level, their weight of their cholesterol, rather than no one's looking at particles, no one's looking at oxidized LDL. They're not worried about
inflammatory levels or blood or insulin levels or blood sugars or look at the biomarkers that make a difference. Look at the biomarkers that matter, not the stuff that we can just blame because there happened to be LDL in that plaque. That must be the problem. Look at the stuff that really indicates, that gives us a really good picture of health.
Yeah, the full picture, not just one that we know how to medicate, right?
Yeah.
Not just the symptoms that we know how to have a prescription for. And that is really what's driving. It's the profit for driving the diagnosis. So I'm so glad to meet you and here have someone to dialogue with on this. It's so refreshing. I mean, I think what caught my eye with you was you swimming in the ocean there in the winter in the UK, which I know has got to be incredibly cold. Now, I do some cold plunging. I do some cold showers. Nothing would compare to the ocean in the UK in the winter. I can't even imagine. And you're out there doing laps with your friend. And, and then coming in and being chipper and in the car over, it's like, oh, you're not in wetsuits. You're going to get a cap and your swimsuit and you're out there swimming. And I'm just so much admiration for that. You weren't just sitting there soaking and huddling and being miserable. You're out for a swim.
Yes.
And that's in that cold plunge, it's a cold plunge, but then there's
immersion. Full on immersion. Yeah. That's amazing. Love it though. It's so invigorating, Zane. It's incredible. I started just over a year ago, again, in the height of the winter, and thought, this is something that I'd like to do. But at the time, I didn't even like the idea of a cold shower. But I know that there's so many benefits to cold water exposure, but I didn't quite know how life-changing it would be. And it really has been for that sort of mental resilience, but also the physical benefits you feel from. I like to think of it in sort of different sections. So in terms of the kind of the neurological effects, I love the way that it helps to balance out the dopamine system. So we tend to shy away from pain. We shy away from emotional pain. We shy away from physical pain. We're creatures that are seeking pleasure and avoiding pain all the time. And I think when we turn to pain a little bit and embrace it and face it full on, it really helps us to recognize that actually pain's not such a bad thing. And when we get that physical pain, particularly as you get with very, very cold water, when you come out, you get this really nice increase in dopamine naturally. It doesn't spike really high like certain things would do. For example, amphetamines and drugs really spike your dopamine levels up. But when you have this cold water exposure, this physical pain, your dopamine system really lights up after. So you get this lovely pain pleasure after you've had the exposure. The other thing it does for sort of your mental well-being is it really helps to create resilience and quieten the lizard brain. That's the amygdala is like going into full crazy, what are you doing? Danger, danger, danger. And it really helps to exercise that muscle of, I'm doing this. I'm not listening to the lizard brain. I'm overcoming that voice that's telling me, don't do this, don't do this. You're crazy. What are you doing? Why are you getting in there? And it helps to quieten, when you have all these fear-driven messages around you all the time, particularly over the last few years, this helps you to exercise your quietening that voice and moving on and doing something that is a little bit challenging. And then you get the physical benefits, which are really pretty vast. But the one I'll focus on today is the improved and increased metabolic health. So we have these different types of fat. We have the white fat, the beige fat, and the brown fat. And the brown fat's rich in mitochondria. And it has a metabolic rate very similar to muscle. So it's very metabolically active. And the more brown fat we have, the higher our metabolic rate. And the higher our basal metabolic rate. So, we can be sat around just working away and we're burning more calories than if we had lots of storage fat, which is the white fat. Gotcha. So when we're exposed to these really cold temperatures, the coming out after, you get this shivering effect. And that's actually the effect you want to have, because that's producing succinate, which is a protein that helps to convert white fat to beige fat and beige fat to brown fat. So it improves and increases the ratio of brown fat to white fat. And the more brown fat we have, the higher our metabolic rate. So there are multiple health benefits, but actually for the metabolic rate and burning extra calories from all those delicious fats we're eating, then cold water exposure is just great for that.
Absolutely. The brown fat's full of more mitochondria, correct? That would
absolutely
the energy burning and makes it so much more comparable to the energy burning of muscle.
Yes.
Like you said, even as we're saying, so imagine also creating body heat. So that would help you create body heat. So the cold water stimulates that production. I hadn't heard that the succinate protein being mentioned before. That's brilliant. That
comes when you shiver. So if you try and suppress the shiver, you're suppressing the succinate. So you kind of want to make your body work to heat up. So this is why if you're doing cold showers, you don't necessarily want to go from a cold shower straight to a hot shower. You want to make your body work a little bit. So make it warm itself up. and allow a little bit of shivering. Obviously, anyone listening to this, it has to be within safety parameters. Always swim with a friend. Expose yourself gradually. You know, I'm not just advocating go out and jump into freezing cold water and do this, you know, unregulated. Make sure you're safe when you're doing this.
Right.
But the allowing your body to shiver, warm, you know, put your warm clothes on, but allowing that shiver really helps with the brown fat formation with this succinate. So, and the other thing, Zane, is when you're doing a ketogenic diet, so I do that fasted. I never go into the lake having eaten. I like to do it in a fasted state. So I'm really making my body work for this. And the ketones will increase brown fat metabolic rate anyway. So insulin will suppress brown fat metabolism, and ketones increase brown fat metabolism. So you have this double whammy. Wow. Ketones ramping up the brown fat, the cold is making more brown fat. So you just become this metabolic machine. It's great.
Wow. That's incredible. The other benefit I know I appreciate is the connection. It increases that connection between the nervous system and the cardiovascular system, where it causes those blood vessels to contract. Yes. And then as you warm back up, they will expand, but that's something we lose. We get the hypertension. And so we lose that ability for our cardiovascular system to be elastic, essentially.
Yes.
So it stimulates that elasticity and the reconnecting our nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system to well, basically everything working together to function, which functions well when we're 20, but when you get to 50 and 60, not so much. We need to stimulate them.
Yeah, we live in a very climate-controlled environment, so we don't get that vasodilation and vasoconstriction because we're just in the same environment the whole time. And when we get into the cold water, you get this immediate constriction and dilation as the body's trying to regulate where it wants the temperature to be and, you know, how it's going to adapt to this quite extreme environment. And this situation, this hormesis, is deliberate stress to the body, but for improving its function ultimately. And these kind of short bursts of deliberate stress, like fasting, like cold water exposure, like sauna exposure, exercise, they're all allowing us to become stronger and adapting, because we're creatures of adaptation. And so when we're constantly adapting, we're constantly getting stronger and constantly getting better at adapting to this environment that we're supposed to be adapting to. So we are phenomenal creatures.
We really are. And that's why you said it's beneficial to let your body warm up itself, not jump to the hot shower or jump back to the sauna and then back. There's some benefit to that moving lymph to go cold, hot. But when you really want the benefit from the cold plunge, let your body warm back up naturally. That's the adaptation process. That actually creates the change you're looking for. So that's truly a benefit. Wow. And so there's obviously, as you mentioned, that's a benefit to someone who's trying to improve insulin sensitivity or lower their insulin levels, and lower inflammation. Your diet needs to be in place. It's certainly not a Band-Aid for a bad diet, but I would think it's accelerating the same process of improving the improved metabolism, fat burning, all the things. These work together. The exercise, the improved diet, the cold plunge. What other secrets do you have of health? What are your other biohacks? Anything else you can?
I think a daily walk in the morning. I think daylight is incredibly important. And when we get out in the morning, have a walk first thing in the morning. You're getting natural daylight into your eyes. Don't wear sunglasses. Obviously, don't look directly up at the sun if you're lucky enough to have sun this time of year. We have a lot of clouds, but even with cloud cover, we're getting that direct sunlight into our body via the eyes, and we're talking directly to the circadian clocks within every single cell of the body. Walking or going for a gentle jog or cycling. Also, you have this incredible benefit of the passing motion. As you're walking, as you're forward walking, you get this passing motion via the eyes, and that has an impact on the amygdala, and it calms the amygdala. So it's very good at quietening the amygdala, reducing anxiety, but increasing alertness. So it helps to really waken the body, but calm the anxiety. So you get the daylight coming in, which is directly communicating with your cells. What time of day is it? Our bodies are incredibly smart. Our bodies will know just via the light what time of day it is. So having a walk first thing in the morning, and also looking out to the horizon, which is really good for your eyes, your lens, allowing your lens to shorten and lengthen, which again, a lot of people don't get. They're just in front of their computers all of the time. So they start to get contraction of the lenses and migraines and changes in vision. So by going outdoors and keeping your eyes at the kind of eye level, not looking down at your feet, looking out to the horizon, and you could do some nasal breathing if you want as well. I'm a huge fan of nasal breathing.
Yes.
And then coming back, you're already stimulating your body without having eaten anything at that point. I love a fat coffee or a butter coffee or a ghee coffee. Especially if I'm having one meal a day, I will almost inevitably have a decaf, ghee or butter or both, collagen, some mushroom powder. I like cordyceps and lion's mane, blitz it all up, have my coffee. And then try to get outdoors every 90 minutes to get some more daylight in, but particularly around 4 o'clock. So again, you're getting that as the light's starting to go down, 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's telling your brain it's this time of day. So that's going to help improve sleep. It's again talking directly to your cells. It's helping to set the circadian rhythm. And it also helps to some extent to mitigate against the blue light that you might be getting exposed to at sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night. Getting that sunlight into your eyes, getting that daytime into your eyes at morning and then 4, 5 o'clock in the evening really helps with melatonin production and really quality sleep.
Excellent. Yeah, sleep is a abused component of our health, I think, especially with the with being, like you said, on screens, being shut in, up late watching Netflix, binge watching and all of the shut in environment we had over the last couple of years, especially. But just really not getting that sun exposure and the movement, like you said, that's amazing. Yeah, sleep really. People brag about thinking they don't need it, and they realize how important it is. But the sun exposure is so important to creating that
sun and sleep. And sleep, the other thing that really impacts sleep, Zane, is our ability to switch off. And when our blood sugars are consistently high, when our inflammatory levels are consistently high, when we have poor absorption in our gut, our magnesium levels plummet. And that causes a lot of anxiety. Magnesium is needed to produce GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that's very calming and really helps us to get into a nice, deep, peaceful sleep. So when GABA levels are low, which also happens when progesterone levels are low, but it really happens when magnesium levels are low, we struggle to switch off and our mind's just racing. So I like to take magnesium biglycinate, which is a particular type of compound that can cross the blood-brain barrier, as opposed to some other magnesium compounds that, might be good for gut or might be completely unavailable, like magnesium oxide. But certain supplements before bed can be really beneficial to help you get that really nice, deep sleep with plenty of REM sleep and not just the more superficial level of sleep.
Right. Excellent. Great advice. Thank you. It's been brilliant. This is amazing. I love this. Thank you so much for coming on your house. Now, I know I found you at Pauline J. Cox on Instagram. You're also on Facebook. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a Facebook community called Healthy Keto Diet and Lifestyle, which is a free group that, I often share blogs and just food pictures. It's an area for supporting people on their journey wherever they are. They might just be low carb, they might be not even started on this journey yet, but they want somewhere to start and they want a supportive community to surround themselves with, because that's a really key part of making these changes, is surrounding yourself with like-minded people. So I run that group, and I also have the membership, which is My Health Mastery. But a really nice starting place is just getting your head into the right space and meeting like-minded people and stepping onto this journey, just making those first few changes.
Gotcha. So Healthy Keto Diet and Lifestyle. That's
right. Yes.
Okay. Great. And you, of course, Sow and Arrow is your store where people can find some resources for changing their diet, for getting some low carb and keto foods without being worried about the gluten and the and the seed oils and all that kind of stuff. It's
Yes.
really good. That's awesome. I'll link to those in the show notes. This has been incredible. I love everything you've shared, and the way you explain it. It's very easy to follow. I can understand why you're having so much success in your group. Thank you again. I appreciate your time to come on and share
so
this
welcome.
with my audience. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Zane. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's so nice to meet someone so like-minded. I've been following your Instagram, and I knew we'd have great conversation because we're very aligned with our messaging. So thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Look forward to doing it again. Maybe when your book comes out, when your next book comes out, we'll do it again. And we can talk about that. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.